and welcome to the shed. Today's video I'm going to be reviewing the Luban number 62 low angle jack plane. Hope you enjoy. We have a good nice thick sort of black powder coated paint that is on the base of this, which is pretty common with most modern hand planes. It's made out of ductile steel and not cast iron like the traditional ones would have been. All modern hand planes, from your Lee Nielsen's and your Veritises and Cliftons, they're all using ductile steel these days, which does mean that if you do drop it, you actually have a greater chance of it not breaking, but I still wouldn't recommend dropping them, but that's what they're using. It is a lot stronger. So the guts of it is very simple in these low angle planes. There's no frog, it's just not there. It's a one piece casting set at a low angle, which is why it's called the low angle jack. Jack plane, because it's the jack of all trades with the standard sort of number 5 that you'd be used to, is considered the jack plane, the jack of all trades. It's useful for everything, because the low angles in the number 5, it's been called the jack. Since this is not a Bailey pattern, we don't have the Bailey pattern frog, we don't have the Bailey pattern adjusters. What we have instead is this piece here, which is called the Norris adjuster. So you can see there's no screws here. This is just cast straight into the sole of the plane, and then it's had a CNC machining to fit the Norris adjuster down in here. And this screw here actually doesn't move, it's fixed in place. There's no adjustment on that. So you can see here, you'll see these lines. And yes, that is the machining, but it's deceptive. It's kind of an optical illusion. You see this machining, but it's actually flat. So as I've come to expect, I use any sort of a straight edge that I can fit, and this is the shortest one that I can get in here to fit. And there's no gaps in under it. It's a little hard for me to show you that, but in this particular one that I've got, the machining's nice and flat, which means it's got a good mating surface for the back of the blade to sit on. And yes, I did say the back of the blade, we'll get to that in a minute. We can see this toe cap here moves back and forwards like that. So let me just show you how that happens with this. So we'll take the handle right off. The adjustment sits under the handle, and the handle locks this adjustment in place. So we've got this screw fitting on here, this brass plate, and the reason that brass plate is here is to allow the adjustment down on this brass piece here, and that's what's adjusting that mouthpiece. Little simple piece, and when this is screwed down, you can see that this is on a slight angle, so as you move it, it rotates and actually rocks off the handle to adjust the mouth plate. We have another nice little machined piece that sits just here, which we're going to need, and you want to keep these metal pieces oiled up so they actually slide. Now the machining here, once again, looks a little rough, but it is actually smooth. There's no gaps under it, it's nice and flat, and I've had no issues with that moving. And so what we're holding here, let me turn it over. We have this machined piece of steel. They've taken or chamfered the edges off on this so it doesn't get stuck. It does feel a little rough on the edges, but when you flatten it, you're going to get those sharp edges on that mouthpiece, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Once again, you want this oiled, because it has to slide against the machining, and the machining here is identical to the machining that's done for the, for instance, frog section of this plane, where the blade sits. And we can see that's all nice and flat here, and it's hard to actually check this because it's got these two ridges, and my understanding is they're just ridged out so this slides a little bit easier and there's not too much suction from any oil in there that actually gets it to sort of cant a little bit. It just I'm not 100% sure on the reasoning for that, but as you can see, it moves here nice and freely, and so you regularly want to keep that oiled in there as well. That's just common sense, because any metal parts, or metal on metal parts, we definitely want to lubricate them with a light machine oil. 3-in-1 oil is what I would use. Could probably use a paste wax, but I don't see the point. 3-in-1 oil just works well. It's designed for that purpose of lubricating two metal parts. So now that we've got that back in here, let's turn this over and we'll just quickly put this back together so you've got some idea. So there's a little machined hole just here. This piece just has a little riser, so that sits down in there. And we can see that's going to rock here nicely. So then we bring the handle in, and I'm not going to quite do it right up because this is going to clamp the whole lot together and stop it moving. So we can see at the moment that this is sitting right out the front. So we need to adjust it. So I'm going to loosen that off slightly, and we can see as this moves side to side, that moves this back and forwards. So what I want to do is leave it fully open to start with, because we want to adjust where the blade sits first. And so that's how that very basic mechanism works. The machining is flawless, it works fine. The only issue I have had with that is that sometimes shavings can get caught. There's little gaps in the top here, and sort of a little bit of dust and shavings can get stuck in under there, and it kind of jams it a little bit because it's got really no movement for any dust to be in there. So if you do have issues with one of these, whether it's this one or the Lee Nielsen or anyone else that makes these style, I would check in under there for a little bit of dust, because at least in this one, a little bit of dust can just creep in there. Very, very fine dust. And it gets into that oil and gets caked in there, and it just locks it up, which I think is partially why there are chamfers on that piece in those very back corners. If a little bit of dust gets in there, it can still slide. So, since this is a low angle, or what's known as a bevel up plane, the blade goes this way up. It's a single iron, a thicker iron, same thickness as your modern blades that you'll see on your Stanley Baileys, like this Luban one here. But we don't have a chip breaker because it's bevel up. No room for a chip breaker. Obviously, if it was this way around, we could have a chip breaker, but because it's bevel up, we don't have room for a chip breaker, so there is no chip breaker. Which means that this is a very easy sharpen. Now, this one came with the back nice and flat. I'm just going to bring some sharpening stones here, and I'll just we'll give it a quick hone up. All I've done here is just sharpen it so you can still see the main milling marks here, which I haven't removed on this yet. I've not used it enough for that. All I've done is just put it straight to the stones freehand and just given it a quick touch up. Now the bevel on these comes at 25 degrees. So I'm just going to use my quick little diamond sharpening setup here. For those of you who haven't seen it, 400, 800, 1200 strop. That's what I go with. Lubricated with just a little bit of, this is automotive window cleaner. Any sort of window cleaner works. So the first thing you'll do when you get it is flatten the back. So I've actually been using this without flattening the back because by eye it was pretty flat, so I haven't actually sharpened it here, but you can see that it's taking it off pretty evenly across there. So you can see here, these Luban blades, and it was the same with this one when I first got it, is they do have these deep milling marks on the bevel. Now, I don't worry about removing them the very first time. As I go through the sharpening and I keep sharpening it, eventually they're going to disappear, and I don't think it's too much of an issue. But you can see that they're mostly removed there, and probably another 4 or 5 minutes and I could remove that all, but I just don't see the point because we've got a nice sharp blade at this point. Flat back to a flat bevel. Now, when it does come to flattening the back of these, you don't have to be quite as pedantic as you do with the Bailey style or the normal Stanley style, because you don't have that chip breaker mating onto the back of it, and so you can still get a sharp edge without it 100% flat, but I was able to get it completely flat inside of about 5 or 10 minutes there. We're going to take a quick look at the blade here for a second. When we obviously have this keyed slot here that sits over the screw down in here, and we have these 2 holes here. So the very first hole is what you'll put it in when you first get it. Now, I think mine from the factory was sitting in this one and I had to move it to that one. But you sit it here, because you've got all the depth of blade, this has to be further up in here, otherwise it sticks out too far and you don't have proper adjustment. The second hole is after you've worn off maybe a centimetre of your blade, and you'll put it there so it still reaches the opening. So to put the Norris adjuster in, or if we have a quick look at the Norris adjuster, so we have that little piece, and that's what these holes are for, as I mentioned. that little round one there sits in the blade, so that faces the opposite way to this piece, which sits down in our housing. And we've got a machined hole in there, so we simply line it up and we drop it in, as you can see here. And with the Norris adjuster, we have that depth adjustment and our lateral movement all in this one little mechanism. So let's go ahead and put the blade in. So you want to be very careful here. So we set it over that screw just there, slide it down, rock our Norris adjuster until it's held it, and you can give it a quick little like this, and you'll hear it tapping off the sides, so you know you've got it in there. And then we have what all Norris adjusters tend to have, is this style of screw down lever cap. So what happens is, you can see how there's a little ding in the top here. That's where this little point pushes down, clamps it in place, and so it cams off the screw as normal. So it pushes here, cams off the central pin screw, puts it in along the bottom here, so along this piece, and clamps it in place. So let's adjust it so it slides in like this, nice and easy, and do it up. You don't need to do that up too tight, because these style of caps hold very well. So these are a little finicky. So currently with that done up, I can change the depth adjustment, but the lateral adjustment won't move. So what I have to do here is let that off just a touch more. You don't want it taken off too much, because everything will slide around. So it's kind of a little bit looser when you do your lateral adjustment, and then slightly tighter when you do your depth adjustment. And so then we're gonna eyeball down it, make our adjustments, and then turn just a fraction of a turn. It's not even a quarter of a turn. It's probably maybe an eighth of a turn, if I had to say. Now you're wondering, well, we need to adjust this, so you loosen your handle off slightly and bring it in, and you can decide how far off the mouth that you want to go. It depends how much of a depth of cut you can go. Now you can see that this is not even, but that's because the blade edge, when I squared it off, is a little bit out, but that's pretty common with all hand planes. You're not always going to get them dead square across there. So now I've got this all set up, and you can see that everything just works and operates well with a little bit of know-how. I did struggle with this a little bit because this is my first bevel up, and really my first time really dealing with a Norris adjuster, which are a little fiddly. So do be prepared with these. These Norris adjusters are not the most perfect. I do believe that the adjuster on the Baileys is a little bit easier, but it does work. You just got to be a little careful with your tension on your lever cap to actually get it to work. And it does work once you kind of get an idea for yourself as to how much tension and how little to let it off when you do a lateral adjustment, and how much to tighten it. The handles are nice and tight on this. I had to tighten the screw here and here a little bit. The wood probably shrunk a little bit while it was in storage. And this screw, unlike in your normal ones, this screw doesn't turn. It's all locked in place, holding that brass plate on the bottom there. I have not flattened the sole of this. I took it to a straight edge. I had a quick look at it. It was close enough, and I've been using it for 2 or 3 months. Actually, yeah, about 3 months, maybe a little bit longer now. And I haven't actually flattened it. So what I thought I'd do is I'll grab my piece of melamine that I use for flattening it, and we'll quickly run it across the surface to see how flat it actually is, just so you can see how flat this particular one was, and then we'll look at how square the sides are to that sole. So I just put some new paper on there just to speed this process up, and we can see that it's smooth all the way through, and there's just a tiny bit here, so we'll just go for another couple of minutes and we should be done. And for me, I'm calling that flat. It was already pretty flat to start with, no major issues. So you can see this plane came from the store pretty flat. Only a few minutes. I've had some vintage ones where I've had to spend about an hour and a half flattening them, sometimes 2 hours because they're really out. So this is actually in pretty good shape, especially for its price point. So there are two ways in which we can check. We can check from the sole to the side and from the side to the sole. Now, in this case, since we just flattened the bottom, that's going to be our best reference to check the side. So I would never really recommend checking this way around. It's always best to go off your known flat surface to it. And now I've got to check the other side. Since this is a side that if we're using it on a shooting board, it's got to be square, so this is the one we really want to be square. And I'm seeing just an ever so slight skerrick of light under there. I don't think it's enough to throw it out of square, so I'm going to say that this is square. Now, I'm not saying all of them are, but this particular one is pretty good. It's out by such a minuscule amount that I don't think you're even going to notice it when using it on a shooting board, because it's only right up on the very top here. So through this bottom part, which is where most of it, and that's where it's going to rest when you're using it on a shooting board, is actually square. But other than that, the opposite side, this side, is sitting square. I had someone ask how well this works on a shooting board when I reviewed it, so I'm going to get the shooting board out here and we'll shoot some timber. All you can see here, and if you've seen the video where I made this, I have this ridge that runs on my Veritas shooting plane. So I do recommend that if you make one of your own, make a little fence so it has no tendency to want to rock out when you're using it. It's just going to make it so much easier to concentrate on just sliding through. I'm just going to have to worry about pushing this way just to hold it there, so I shouldn't have any problems. So to me that looks like it's coming out pretty square. It's hard to tell with such a short piece, but it's square that way as well. I'm not seeing any light coming out under it, and that's what will be affected the most by the wing. So you can see by that, I don't know if you can actually see that there. I'm trying to show you it as best I can, but that's actually square for me. I know some people have a little, what they call a hot dog thing that they put on here, or another handle thing, but I find, at least for my hand, with my fingers wrapped, so I wrap my fingers just here, very gently, and then sort of just hold it like that, and it's quite easy, without the weight of the hand plane on it, to just push it, and I find that my hand sort of sits nicely. This machined piece here looks like it's been designed perfectly for someone to sort of grab it here with their hand, so there's no sharp edge here to dig in. It's not really sharp on the edge here, although you can break that edge with a little bit of sandpaper if you need to. But for me, it feels nice and smooth, actually, on all the corners, and it just fits quite nicely to slide back and forwards, and it's really easy to move on its side. So there you have it, folks. That's my review of the Luban number 62 low-angle jack plane, and as I've said, I'm pretty impressed with the quality, the fit, and the manufacturing of it. So I do believe that if you are in the market for a low-angle jack plane, that you can't really go wrong for the price point of the Luban. So if you liked this video, please do like and subscribe down below. While you're down there, do sound off in the comments. And if you'd like to see another Luban review such as this one, do check out the review up here where I reviewed the Luban number 4 hand plane. Bye for now.